Hello everyone, welcome to another video by Cheeky Games. This video will be about the alternating battlegrounds of Vampire the Masquerade Heritage. In the game, these will change depending on the age you are in. I will explain them one by one, and for your convenience I've added links to them in the description down below so you can skip to whichever you are interested in. The three basic ones I've explained in another video, and I will also link that with timestamp down below. This video assumes you know the gameplay of the game. If you don't, have a look at the general gameplay video I've made, also found in the description. I will activate the battlegrounds and show you with which vampire I have done so, but I'll not make any bloodlines so that everything will remain visible, even on mobile devices. Be advised that normally you don't just activate one battleground over and over. The normal game rules apply, but for the sake of explaining, that is exactly what I will do here. Well, let's dive into it. So this battleground is called the Inquisition. So medieval times, the Inquisition is coming for the vampires, and hopefully you can redirect them, maybe not. This one feels, funnily enough, more about attacking your enemies a bit than about actually scoring points, but it does both. So let's explain how it works. So you place one of these tokens, they're called clan politics tokens, on the 4 spots up here. It shouldn't matter what you put them on, but I always do 2 reds and 2 greens just to be sure. So how does it work? Like every battleground, when a vampire gets activated, when this is activated, it's activated on this battleground. So let's do an example with the Viking Queen over here. So let's assume somebody recruited the Viking Queen and she gets activated, right? So she has the wealthy type, right? It's up here. And if you look on the board here, you also see all the types: warlike, wealthy, scholarly, and clandestine. So when you activate a vampire, what you do is, if the token is up here, you move it down there. If it's already down there, you leave it down there. Then you check if the token matches your disposition. So in this case, she has a red disposition, the token was red, so it's fine. So this is the entire activation for the Viking Queen. If we then would activate, for example, the Faithless Priest over here, wealthy, already down there, don't have to do anything, but not the same type, so we flip it to match the Faithless Priest. That's the entire activation. It's quite simple, but then something funny happens if we ever get to the point where all 4 of them are activated. When they're all activated, that sort of implies that they have found enough information, they're interested, and they're going to go on it now. So what does that do? It's called the trial, and they will look for victims. So if we assume that these vampires over here are in bloodlines of someone, it could be the same player, it could be different players, it doesn't matter. So whenever a trial happens, they will look at which vampire has the most infamy. People in Torpor are ignored. So even though this one has the most infamy, ignored because in Torpor, right? So nothing happens here. So these both have the same amount of infamy, so they both get targeted by the same trial. So multiple vampires can be on the same trial. So the companion over here has 2 infamy, and you see that the red one over here is only once down here, right? His disposition is only once. So we count those 2 up, so 1, 2, 3, and if it's 5 or higher, the Inquisition is gonna put him in Torpor. But it wasn't, right? It was 1, 2, 3. If it's not, the Inquisition is like, well, we gotta let this guy go. We don't know what's going on. But he gets more infamous for sure, but no Torpor. But the maid over here, she has the 1, 2, and then she's green, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So bam, she gets placed into Torpor by the trial. After the trial is done, they all go back up here, and the games can begin again. So like always, there's a scheme associated with this battleground. It's called Church and Stake, and it says, for each archetype in Judices, assign 1 infamy to any vampire of matching archetype. So down here, that's called the Judices. So let's say it's a bit like this. So if this would be the way, and we also have the Viking Queen and the Faithless Priest that we already activated in the past on this thing, then we take a look. So right now, the Warlikes are not in Justice, so we don't have to look at them, so the companion is safe, right? Then the wealthy ones, ooh, they are, so we have to look at all the wealthy vampires, and if this matches them, they gain an infamy. So the Viking Queen is wealthy, yes. Green, no infamy. The Faithless Priest over here, wealthy, yes. Green, also yes. Gains an infamy from the scheme, if somebody does the scheme, right? Which we're assuming someone does right now. Scholarly type is in torpor, doesn't matter. Clandestine types, well, only one clandestine type, also in torpor. So that's what the scheme does. So the scheme is a way to add infamy to vampires, and then when the trial happens, obviously you can use that. And that's basically what it does. Then there's the last bit. Like always, they are also meant for scoring. If there's no tie, then the disposition that's least represented on the board, so right now that's red, there's only one red versus 3 green. All the vampires of red in this case would be worth 1 victory point. So there is some points to be had, although if it's 2 against 2, then there's no points to be had for anyone. But I think the trial bit is the most interesting part. So that's the Inquisition. So this battleground is called the Anarch Revolt. Anarchs are a faction of vampires that believe that the current society and standards that have been created are bad for them, and they rebel against it. They want anarchy, no rules. The setup's quite easy. You place 4 Ankhs in all of these 4 cities, and these cities are tied to the directions your vampire can be from. So let's see what happens when I activate a vampire. So let's say I recruit the Viking Queen. She's from the north, so now I have a choice. This is a city, and I can either help the revolt and burn it down, or I can protect the city, say, hey, this is my city, I'm not burning it down, and then I put the Ankh over here. So, what does that mean? So, when I keep on recruiting, I'm just going to focus on the north for a bit. Obviously, normally that would not happen, or maybe it will, I mean, who knows. So the next player then recruits this vampire from the north, and says, no, I want it destroyed. So then they put it in the fire. Then the next player is like, no, good, we are also from the north and I do want to protect it, I put it on here. Then we go back to the player who played the Viking Queen, and that player activates the Viking Queen again. Well, when it gets activated, it can do all the battlegrounds again, so it's from the north. So I again have a choice. I could burn it, but I mean, I was already protecting it, so I'm going to protect it as well. And something interesting happens whenever a city is empty. Whenever a city is empty, all the vampires that have at least 1 Ankh of it get a power. So the Viking Queen has 1 Ankh, well 2 even, 1 power. This Chieftain, 1 power. It's not like because the Viking Queen has 2 Ankhs, she gets 2 powers, just at least 1 Ankh. And then all the Ankhs get returned except for the Ankhs that were burned. So why is that interesting? If at a certain point all the Ankhs are burned, then that city is basically destroyed, and whenever you get a northern vampire, you don't have anything to activate anymore. And that is interesting for the points as well later on. Let's assume that the situation is a bit more like this. 2 have already been burned, 2 are over here, and the Viking Queen gets activated. So now I have a choice. Again, as always, I can take the Ankh and I can burn it, but because it's the 3rd one, if the 3rd Ankh of any city ever gets burned, the 4th one also gets burned, even if it's on a vampire, right? If the Chieftain took this one, and now I activate the Viking Queen, if I decide to burn it, this one also gets burned, which basically means the city is in shambles. Another way an Ankh can get burned is if a scheme places a vampire in torpor that has an Ankh, then that Ankh automatically gets burned. This is the 3rd one, 4th one also gets burned. Doesn't matter where it is. So you do this for all the cities. I've now been focusing on the north, but yeah, maybe it's a bit more like this, I don't know. Then, there you go. So 2 of the cities were completely destroyed. So at the end of the game, each vampire that is from these 2 cities, the ones that were not destroyed, gets points equal to the cities that were destroyed. So in this case, these 2 get points, and it's 2 points because 2 cities were destroyed. If it was like this, then these 3 get their points, and they only get 1 point. But if 3 of the cities are completely destroyed, then only 1 is still left standing, then everyone, in this case from the south, would get 3 points. This one has a scheme, as always. It's the basic scheme. You gain an infamy and you activate every coterie member on the battleground. As a last note on the Anarch Revolt, if you ever activate a Wanderer, you can just pick any of the areas, just like with the last Battlegrounds that we've done for the directions, and also like those, this one's always worth 1 victory point at the end of the game. So right now, you know, I could burn the 3rd southern one to get both of them burned, or I could take it, or I could burn the black northern one, or I could take it. So the roamers are always quite flexible, but they are not the point. They don't make that much points at the end of the game, right? No matter how many things are burned or not, the wanderers, roaming vampires, sorry, are always 1 victory point at the end. This battleground is called the Masquerade. At a certain point, the vampires realize that the mortals are vastly outnumbering them, and they're getting smarter, they're communicating better and whatnot. So they don't want to be seen anymore. They want the mortal world to believe that they are a myth. And they call keeping up that pretense the Masquerade. So the setup is quite easy. We place 4 investigator tokens over here, not yet on this board, over there. And every of the directions gets 3 unks placed in it. And every time you activate a vampire, so let's say I'm activating this lore keeper because I probably just recruited her, we have to place a investigator token on that track if there's not one already. And if there's one already, we advance it on that track. So 1 activation would put it here, right? If I would then, for whatever reason, activate the lore keeper again, it will go one higher. Or if I would activate any other vampire from the west, so I now have a Faithless Priest. So the Faithless Priest is also from the west. It's on track 2 right now. So it goes in here with the unks. Whenever it reaches the unks, the vampire that was guilty for reaching the unks gets the unk. Because what does that mean, right? The investigators, when you recruit a vampire, the investigators are like, hey, this is weird. Something happened there. And then every time they get a bit closer. And then when they're here, they have figured something out, which we don't want to happen, right? So any vampire that has an unk is a bit of a target. I'll explain why. Because if any scheme places a vampire in torpor that has an unk, then they get 2 power. So the Coterie leader that did the torpor gains 2 power. 2 power is good, so that's great. And then the unk would go back to the battlefield. So that's a good way to get it back on there. If you, for whatever reason, recruit a roaming vampire, then you can pick whichever track you're going to progress the investigators on, but you have to progress them too. So that's a bit of a thing, right? Because if it's like this, then whichever you're going to activate, it's always going to go into the investigation. I mean, you want one track to be empty, then you can just barely activate it without it being a problem. So if it was like this and I'm like, well, I'll just take the one from the north, then it goes in here, it can't go further. I take it and it goes over there. Again, this could be a target for torpor, right? Because if somebody deals with the problem that this person was too conspicuous, then the whole vampire community congratulates them and gives that person power. So let's say that at the end, this is what it looks like. There's so many unks left on the board. Then every northern vampire, this is the northern vampire, is worth 2 victory points. From the east, 1 victory points. From the west, 1 victory points. And the southern ones, they have not been figured out, not even once. It's worth 3 victory points. Roaming vampires are worth 1 victory point. Doesn't matter what happens on the board, they're always worth 1 victory point. So that's the game of cat and mouse that the Masquerade does. Let's, last but not least, go over the scheme that it has. It's called Close the Breach. And it says whoever was the Coterie leader gains 1 power. And you can move 1 of the investigator tokens back. So maybe the southern ones kept doing that. That's why they've never been found out. They just kept doing this scheme to put it back here. And now they have a little bit of room again to recruit more southern vampires without getting caught. So that's the Masquerade. So this battleground is called the Court. Vampires have their own sort of court situation going on. And they have formal titles. So this one represents that, and these are the 4 titles that can be earned in this battleground. This one's called the Harpy, a person of influence. This one is the Sheriff, the person that basically makes sure everyone follows the law. The Primogen, those are the Council of Elders that advise the Prince, and the Prince, the leader of that domain. So how does it work? Whenever we activate a vampire, let's say I've just recruited the Plague Doctor, then we look at the disposition it has. This one has the green disposition, so I grab one of the tokens. They're 2-sided, right? I mean, I can flip them any way I want. And on the color that the activated vampire has. I place it in this voting box over here. So let's say that happens a bunch of times, right? And after we've had several votes, all of the votes are in, which is when there's no votes left over here. All 5 of them are in there. Whenever that happens, let's say it's like that. Whenever that happens, I've grabbed some random vampires from Bloodlines. We see which of the 2 dispositions won the vote. In this case, green won the vote. So that means that only green vampires are interesting for this vote. And the vote basically means that green vampires are now going to get the next title, and whoever has the most power will get that title. So right now these are both red, and even though this one has 4 power, which is way more than the rest, red didn't win the vote. Green won the vote, so he's not getting anything. Also red. These 2 are green. This one's in torpor. As always, torpor gets ignored, so that one can't win anything. So this is the winner of this vote, 2 power and green, and gets the current title. So this marker over here shows you what the title is you're currently fighting for, and that is the Harpy title. So the Harpy title goes over here to the Hired Sword, and then this one goes 1 further. So if we assume that all of that happens again, right, then Hired Sword would win again, right? I haven't placed more vampires here. I could, right? But if you already have a title, you cannot win another title. Even if the other title is more interesting, you cannot. So the Hired Sword can't win again. But if we look at it like this, let's say the situation is a bit different. Red won. Then it's between these 2, right? Which could be in the same bloodline. They could be in a different bloodline. Doesn't matter. Whenever there's a tie, the title does not get given to anyone, and we also go to the next vote. So then again they all go out, and we have to wait until 5 activations again, and then again another vote can happen. So maybe once this vote has happened, maybe we're already at the prince. Why not? So another vote, another red. So now the prince one gets taken to the winner, and in this case red won, right? And this one is the red one with 3. She has 2, so the chieftain over here becomes the prince. So there's a couple of things. We have the normal scheme as always. There's one extra thing it has. It gives you an infamy as the Coterie leader, and you activate all of the Coterie members on the battleground. But it does one extra thing, and that is give you 1 power to assign randomly to any vampire. So that gives you a little bit of influence on who you want to win the vote. But then there's another thing. Whenever a vampire with a court title gets placed into torpor, the person that placed that vampire into torpor gets the title. So if the Viking Queen just lost and is angry, and on her turn or her player's turn they do a scheme which places the chieftain in torpor, now the Viking Queen gets the title, which would be the same, right? If they would play the Hired Sword in torpor, they would get the Harpy title over here. And you see, like, it's possible that you don't get all of them because of ties, and it just keeps going and it keeps going and it keeps going. And even if like it's already distributed, you can just give it again to the next player. So it's an interesting mechanic. Then at the end of the game, for scoring, every title you have in your bloodline is worth 2 victory points. But then there's one more thing. Whoever is the prince also decides which attribute is worth 2 victory points. So right now the chieftain would be the prince, which means that red is worth 2 victory points. So both the chieftain and the Viking Queen are worth 2 victory points on their own, and they both have a title, so they would be another 2 victory points for whoever has them in their bloodline. So this battleground is called The Rise of Humanity. It's all about that humans are inventing and progressing, and that vampires shouldn't stay behind. They should keep up. Right. So the setup is you grab a clan token for the clans that are playing. It's a 3-player game with a Gangrel, a La Sombra, and a Tsimichi right now. And then you place them on the line marked with 8 on the color, because they have 2 sides, remember, with 2 colors, on the color that your clan leader also has. So let's assume I'm Brunhilde for the Gangrel, she's blue. And then Sasha Vaikos for the Tsimichi, yellow, and I am Tally for the La Sombra, who is blue. So now I've placed my setup. Now, let's say I am the Gangrel, and I recruit the Faithless Priest over here. So I look at, when I activate on this battleground, I look at the attribute that matters, which is yellow or blue. And if it is not the same, right? We just said that for Gangrel it started on blue. So if this is my first recruit, then it's not the same currently. Then we flip it to match that attribute. That's it. But if after that I would recruit as Brunhilde again, stuff happened here, obviously they also had their turns, but let's ignore that for now. Would recruit the Lore Keeper, also yellow. Now it is the same, right? It's yellow. Whenever they're the same, it goes down one, and we grab a scheme from our cards that we haven't drawn yet. So it's nice, but at the same time it's going down. So at the end of every round, the player who has the lowest position on this track becomes player one for the next round. So there is some merit to being low. So you would say, there's no way to go up. Correct. Through recruiting or activating, there's no way to go up. But it also has a scheme, and the scheme is the way to go up. It's called Undead Society. It gives you an infamy, and you increase your clan morality token 1, and you decrease one of your opponents, also one. Not both, but one of them. So in a 2-player game, that's everyone, but in a 4-player game, you really have to pick, and 3-player game as well. So that's the only way for you to get back up. And these numbers over here are also the scoring at the end of that game. So if you're still up here, you get 8 victory points for this, which is nice. But if you're all the way down here, even though you got to draw a lot of cards, and you were player one a bunch, probably you get minus 10 victory points, which sort of hurts. So it's an interesting track. It's a bit different from the Beast Within, so keep that in mind. So again, when it matches, let's say again Gangrel for the example, when it matches, you go down one and you draw a card, a scheme from the cards that you haven't drawn, if you can still do so. If there's no cards to draw, then obviously nothing happens. And if it's the same, if it's different, you flip it. So different flip, same down card, same down card, same down card, different, just a flip, nothing else happens. And at the end of the round, whoever is lowest becomes player one for the next round. But, so you're sort of giving up victory points to be player one or to get cards. So that's an interesting dynamic over there. The last battleground is called the Sabbat Wars. So at a certain point, 2 factions start battling it out, and that's the Camarilla and the Sabbat. So this one over here, the nice clean Ankh, is the symbol of the Camarilla for this battleground, and then over here you have an upside down Ankh with spikes, and that is for the Sabbat. So you have 9 tokens for both of them, and you have 4 that have 1 little mark over here, and then there's 3 that have 2 marks, and then 2 that has 3 marks, and it's exactly the same for both of them. We'll get back to that in a bit. For now, we flip all of them to this side, which still shows which faction it is, but doesn't show the amount of marks every one of these tokens has. So we flip them, and then the setup is that you first, without knowing what the marks were, you place them over here. Oh, I saw that one. In the little book over here, matching where it is supposed to, you know, matching the mark, matching the symbol. And then we place 1 in each area. So there's 4 brown areas over here. That's Eastern, and then there's 4 Western, 4 Southern, and 4 Northern. So we place 1 in each, and it's random, so it does not really matter where they go, as long as we put 1 of the Sabbat and 1 of the Camarilla in each area. So this is the setup. In a 2-player game, 1 person is the Sabbat, the other one is the Camarilla. It doesn't really matter which you are. In a 3-player game, 1 person is Sabbat, 1 person is Camarilla, and 1 person is Anarch. I'll get back to that later. Randomly determined, you don't get to pick. In a 4-player game, it's 2 Sabbats and 2 Camarilla, also randomly determined, you don't get to pick. Which is important, maybe. I mean, some people want to maybe band together, and it's just random. You don't get to choose. So what happens whenever we activate a vampire on these battlefields, on this battleground, sorry. So let's say we have a scholarly type over here, because this battleground cares about the type. So this one's from the west, right? So that's this area over here. And whenever we activate a scholar, we can move a token from this region to a different region. So I could be like, well, I'm going to put the Sabbat over here. So now this region only has Camarilla, but this region has 2 Sabbat influences. If I would activate a wealthy type over here, I can add a token to the region. Oh, this one's also in the west, so I could add another Camarilla token in the west. Or if I activate a warlike type over here, this one is in the north, I can remove a token. I don't place it back in the reserve, I remove it. So let's say this one likes the Sabbat, so removes a Camarilla one. Can't flip it, I just accidentally did, but you're not allowed to flip it because you're not allowed to see. Then you have the clandestine ones, and they actually flip a token in the area they're from. So this one's from the east, so I can flip one of the tokens. I can be like, well, how strong is this one? Oh, it has 2 marks on it. Interesting. So you do that a bunch. The scheme for this one is gain an infamy and activate your entire coterie in the way it should be activated. So remember that it not only matters the area where they're from, but it also matters which of the types they are. It's a combination of both. And then at a certain point, maybe it looks a bit like, I don't know, like this, for example, right? Then at the end at scoring, you start flipping all of these and you start seeing who is winning which area. So I hope it is visible. If not, I'll think about what I'll do about it. But for example, here in the west, there's only 2 Camarilla ones, so Camarilla won the west. Here in the south, there's 1 Camarilla one with 1 point and 2 Sabbat ones with 2 points each. So Sabbat has a presence of 4, Camarilla 1, so Sabbat wins this one. Camarilla 1, Sabbat 1. Then we have the north, and wow, that's a tie, right? They both have a 3, so that's a tie. And then you have another tie over here actually, because the Sabbat has 2 tokens, but they're all both worth 1, so that's 2. And then we have 1 token for the Camarilla, that's 2, so it's another tie. So if any of the factions controls 3 of the regions, then anyone who was following that faction won. Right now, none of them have it. Then the Anarchs win. So remember in the beginning, in a 2-player game, there's no Anarchs, so if the Anarchs win, nobody gets points. In a 3-player game, there are. In a 4-player game, there aren't either. Whoever wins gets 9 points for this battleground. So it's a lot of points. Yeah, the way this one turned out is that nobody won, so Anarchs win. So if this was a 3-player game, then whoever was the Anarchs is happy with this result. So if you're the Anarch player, you're trying to balance everything out. If you are either Sabbat or Camarilla, you're trying to let your people win. And remember, it's not about the amount of tokens, it's about the amount of marks on your token, right? So you have these tokens of 3 that are really strong. And this is funny, right? Because if they both have 1 token, you flip them, and then it's possible that you're equal, but it's also possible that you're not. So that's why the clandestine is interesting. You get to flip, and otherwise you get to move, etc. So for this one, I do suggest just grabbing the rulebook, playing it open next to you, and just seeing what every type does until you have it memorized, and then it doesn't matter anymore. So that's the Sabbat Wars, and with that, I am at the end of the Battlegrounds. Thank you for watching my video, and if you have any questions, put them in the comments down below. See you next time.